Hello and welcome to World Today. I am Pranay Upadhyaya, and today we are going to talk about how US President Donald Trump's inconsistent and unpredictable foreign policy moves has left world stunned. From Canada to Panama, from Mexico to China. Now he eyes a country which in every speech he has called a friend. And yes, we are talking about India. But what is he doing and why is he doing? This remains a big question. Let us walk through to the entire journey of India's foreign policy and India's geopolitical positioning vis-a-vis the US, which is now changing yet another shift. So let us walk through this entire journey, because in World Today, we are going to talk about the India-US relation and also the journey of India's foreign policy in the Asian region. So now you can see that we are talking about 1950s. After post-independence, India's foreign policy was carved out, was shaped, and vis-a-vis the with China, our biggest neighbor, and also the Soviet Union at that point of time, which was pillar of the Cold War. One pillar of the Cold War was Soviet Union, and other pillar was the United States. And that was the Cold War era. If we are talking about the Hindi-Chini Bhai-Bhai phase, which was actually shaped during Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru's time, when there was a regime change, there was a government change in China, and the Communist Party came to power, and Zhou Enlai visited India at that point of time in 1957, then in 1960, and that was a time when Hindi-Chini Bhai-Bhai time was there. But after that, let us talk to 1960s. There was another change. India fought with Pakistan in 1947-48, and thereafter in 1960s, we had a war with China, and India-China war happened. India shifts closer to Soviet Union at that point of time, and that was a policy shift for India, because from non-aligned movement to a closer shift towards USSR happened in 1960s, and that was the geopolitical positioning of India that happened. In 1970s, what happened? USSR backed India in Bangladesh war in 1971. You remember the kind of support the Soviet Union gave to then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi at that point of time, and when US threatened India with the movement of 7th Fleet in the Pacific, in the Indo-Pacific Command, and that was the time. But in 80s, what happened? India-China military standoff in Arunachal happened, that to be in Somdrangchu, that was the thing that happened, and Tiananmen Square protest happened. US sanctions China. That was another shift. There, the US came to this geopolitical theater where India became important, and that was the time when then Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi visited China, and that was the time when the Chinese per capita income and Chinese economy was smaller or lesser than the Indian economy and Indian per capita income. But thereafter, the change happened, and Henry Kissinger, the US Secretary of State, made the shift. President Nixon's era, that was the time when there was a shift. And in 1990s, USSR collapsed. The big pillar of support for India in terms of the military support, in terms of the geopolitical support, India lost that thing. And that was a time in 1990s, India also opened up its economy. US eyed India as a prominent market, and that actually brought a lot of change in terms of geopolitics, in terms of India's positioning and India's geopolitics vis-a-vis United States. And that was the time. In 1991, India liberalized its economy, opens up. In 1998, India conducted nuclear test. United States obviously sanctioned India, made a lot of sanctions, a lot of India's scientific programs, ISRO's program, India's missile development program got suffered just because of the US sanction. That was the time. And also, US sanctioned Pakistan as well. So many wars happened in between. In 1965, India had a war with Pakistan, and that point of time, US gave a lot of ammunition, a lot of military hardware, including the patent tanks, to Pakistan, and that was the time when all this thing started shifting. In 1990s, we are talking about against Pakistan in Kargil war. That was the time when US shifted its power balance, and US started shifting towards India as well. That was the time when the then US President Bill Clinton called the then Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif and said, you have to withdraw your troops from the Indian territory of Kargil, Indian territory of Jammu and Kashmir, and that was the time which actually shifted the thing. In 2000, Bill Clinton visited India. After that thing, That was a historic visit, and that revived the bilateral relationship between India and United States. That was a big shift, and thereafter we have seen in last 2.5 decades that a tremendous shift has happened in India-US relation. In 2000, we have seen tremendous progress in India-US relation. We have seen a lot of military hardware acquisition by India. We have seen 123 agreement, civil nuclear deal. All these things happened in 2000s, from year 2000 to 2010. We have seen tremendous progress because the US President Bill Clinton visited in year 2000. Thereafter, President George Bush visited India. Thereafter, US President Barack Obama also visited India. So a lot of US president visited India. In 2005, India-US civil nuclear deal was announced. That was a big shift. India's nuclear apartheid ended in 2005, and that was a big shift as far as India-US relation is concerned. Thereafter, a lot of things have happened during President Barack Obama's time. India-US relation progressed. But what has happened? There comes US President Donald Trump in his first era, in his first presidency between 2016 to 2020. Trump's first tenure has been very good. It's like dosti ki gaadi. It's like ye dosti hum nahi todenge. That kind of a thing, that kind of partnership India got from US President Donald Trump. What did he give? Trump's first tenure was a game changer as far as India-US relation is concerned. In 2018, Trump accused Pakistan of lies and deceit and froze military aid to Pakistan. Also, in 2019, Howdy Modi event happened in Houston, in Texas, and that was a big event there. US President Donald Trump also joined Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and that victory lap happened in that stadium. That was a game changer. That was an iconic image, iconic visual that we got. The world saw the partnership of India and US moving in that direction. In 2019, US condemned Pakistan-based terrorism post-Pulwama attack. Also, when Article 370 was abrogated, at that point of time, US gave full support to India. Also, on counterterrorism, US gave tremendous support to India. Also, a lot of big deals also happened during that presidency of President Donald Trump, because the foundational agreement, SISMOA, BECA, LEMOA, all happened during the first presidency of Donald Trump. In 2020, Namaste Trump happened. That was just before President Donald Trump's election, and he visited India. We had Namaste Trump event in Ahmedabad. In 2020, during the Ladakh standoff with China, Trump offered a mediation. However, India rejected, but Donald Trump did not take it to heart, and that's why India and US were partnered very well in that era. But now, President Donald Trump comes again in 2025 as Trump 2.0. World thought that partnership of 2016 to 2020, India-US partnership, Modi-Trump partnership is going to sail. It is going to reach to another heights. But game changed here. And Trump announced 25% reciprocal tariff on Indian exports on 2nd of April 2025. Trump labeled India alongside Russia, and Trump imposed unspecified penalty for ties with Russia. That is a big sanction. We do not know how much penalty he is going to impose on India. Trump announced a new trade deal with Pakistan. That is like rubbing on India's wounds, making the relationship sour. That is the thing which Donald Trump is pursuing currently. And that is a big changer. That is a big shift as far as Indo-US terms are concerned. So what is President Donald Trump's game is? What is he doing? Let us try and understand, and I'm being joined by Ambassador Rahul Chhabra, who served in the Ministry of External Affairs as Secretary Economic Relation. Welcome to World Today, Ambassador Chhabra.
Good evening, Pranay. Thank you for having me on your show.
Ambassador Chhabra, my first question to you would be, how India's global positioning is evolving in the changing geopolitics, and especially with respect to President Donald Trump calling India a friend and yet imposing heavy tariffs?
On your first part, that India's global positioning is obviously improving as the economy increases. I mean, we have already become the fourth largest economy, likely to become the third largest in the next before 2028, 29. So that obviously adds a lot of economic heft to the entire status of India. So that is a very important factor when we talk about geopolitics, geoeconomics. But on the other hand, it's all not always smooth sailing in that sense. So there is in diplomacy. I mean, of course, President Trump calls us his friend, but if there is something that he thinks is not in U.S. interest and he needs to do something about it, well, then he's going to be tough. And that's what we are seeing. He's a transactional president. He wants the best for his own country, make America great again. So, in which case, if he needs to take on his friends also, India is one of them. He's taken on the European Union, he's taken on Canada, he's taken on Mexico. I mean, these are all actually partner allies, NATO countries. So,
Yes.
he will do that. And we have to deal with it.
Absolutely, Ambassador Chhabra, you rightly pointed out that he's being transactional and he's being hard on in fact, his friends only. But how should India counter the Trump's transactional approach, like tariffs or his criticism over, India's dealing with Russia, while safeguarding the economic and the strategic interest of India?
The best way to deal with Trump is he's a little more emotional. I mean, he tweets policies, which is not traditional diplomacy. But that's a new style. That's his style. So he's of course welcome to follow that. We don't have to follow a tit for tat every time he tweets, or every time he says something, or he lays down a new sort of red line. We don't need to immediately react to that. We can take our time. We negotiate internally within our own system, Government of India, because it has to be Commerce Ministry, Finance Ministry, Ministry of External Affairs. Everybody will strategize together, get the guidelines of the Prime Minister on an important topic like this, and then we sort of put forth our response, not necessarily in the public domain the way he has done. So, so while he has played out his cards, he's put them out on the table, part of them. Don't need to play again. It doesn't have to be a very public sort of spat or a public discussion. So these all go on behind the scenes. There are back channels, even official channels, which don't have to be back channels. So all this usual diplomatic work, which we diplomats are used to, that's probably going on as we speak. I'm sure is going on, and will lead to some positive results.
No denial about it, Ambassador Chhabra, but what the kind of game President Trump is playing, he is pushing for Pakistan's oil development, so-called, whatever oil Pakistan has, and even suggesting so-called sales to India. This entire thing is very intriguing. How might this impact India's energy security in terms of, whatever, penalty he's likely to impose on India, and the regional dynamics, because the kind of game he is playing, with India and Pakistan is a bit unusual. How do you, what do you make out of it?
He's playing his game. So these are his cards. He's playing his game. We have to play our own game. So we have to strengthen our own internal in terms of economic security, defense security, our security on the borders. So we have to strengthen our own country, irrespective of what he's doing. I mean, we let him do what he's doing because there's no way you can control his tweets or his policy. You can influence it as diplomats. I mean, you speak to his people in his team, speak to President Trump himself. Prime Minister Modi, I'm sure, has spoken to him. So whatever impact that has, but the end game is really that you have to strengthen yourselves to be able to take on challenges of this nature, which are going to keep coming to you. This is sort of the beginning of the challenge. And then, we don't know how serious the oil reserves are. So we don't need to get unnecessarily perturbed. I mean, that's maybe he's heard something about the Pakistan's oil reserves. We aren't aware about those reserves. But, or maybe he's just trying to call the bluff, or we got to call his bluff. So we don't have to do it publicly. We just sort
Obviously,
of
we
go
don't
along.
have to engage with President Donald Trump in this public game and or like, this verbal volley.
Exactly.
You rightly pointed out, Ambassador Chhabra. Thank you very much for joining us. And as Ambassador Chhabra pointed it out, that he is playing his game, but President Donald Trump is trying to play my way or highway. This is going to hurt India-US bilateral relationship, which actually took years of hard work by diplomats like Ambassador Chhabra and many other Indian diplomats. But what is happening on the other front? Let's talk about US-Russia relationship as well, because the relationship between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin once again raised eyebrows on world stage, marked by mutual praise and an unusual level of warmth. But the dynamic appears to have shifted dramatically. President Donald Trump, who previously hesitated from condemning the Russian president and Russia's action in Ukraine, is now taking a much tougher stance, threatening sweeping economic penalties if the war doesn't end soon. And this comes as Ukraine continued to suffer devastating losses. Take a look at this report.
Putin is smart, which of course he's smart. Yesterday, reporters asked me if I thought President Putin was smart. I said, of course he's smart, to which I was greeted with, oh, that's such a terrible thing to say.
It wasn't too long ago when US President Donald Trump showered Russian President Vladimir Putin with praise. In a world where few dared to compliment the Kremlin leader, Trump stood out calling Putin smart and strong, and even referring him to as a friend.
He's a very smart guy. He's a very cunning person.
And the sentiment seemed mutual. President Putin maintained a notably cordial relationship with Trump. Their rapport was one of the most surprising romance on the global stage that nobody saw coming.
First of all, I can tell you his behavior at the moment of the attempt on his life impressed me. He turned out to be a courageous man. Please don't be angry. I understand that we could talk more. But it is so awkward to make him wait. He could get offended. Thank you very much. Good luck.
Trump never directly criticized Russia for launching the war against Ukraine. Instead, he repeatedly questioned Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's actions and leadership. At one point, his administration even paused military aid to Ukraine, a decision that was later reversed. But the once warm Trump-Putin friendship seems to have taken a sour turn. After multiple attempts to mediate a deal between Russia and Ukraine, Trump was less disappointed, and his diplomatic efforts met with silence from a leader he once called a friend. However, Trump did not hold back his criticism of President Putin. On several occasions, he publicly called out the Russian leader for his failure to strike a ceasefire and even issued an ultimatum for Russia.
And I'm disappointed in President Putin because I thought we would have had a deal 2 months ago, but it doesn't seem to get there. So based on that, we're going to be doing secondary tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. It's very simple. And they'll be at 100%. And that's the way it is. It can be more simple. It's just the way it is. I hope we don't have to do it.
He even threatened Russia with fresh sanctions and 100% secondary tariff measures that could seriously impact the Russian economy. But just like his shifting stance on trade deals, Trump's position on Russia continues to evolve. What began as a 50-day ultimatum has now been shortened to just 10 to 12 days.
I'm going to make a new deadline of about 10 or 12 days from today. No reason in waiting. There's no reason in waiting. It's 50 days. I want to be generous, but we just don't see any progress being made.
But what remains the real concern isn't the Trump-Putin dynamic, but how Ukraine continues to suffer while the two leaders are engaged in a Tom and Jerry-like fight. Recently, Russia escalated its assault in Ukraine, launching a wave of missiles and drone strikes on Kyiv, with 27 locations across the capital struck in a single day of violence. With Neha Kumari, Bureau Report, India Today.
This is all we have in World Today. For more global stories, do watch India Today Global. Take care and good night.